My name's Alex. I work night security at a warehouse just outside Charleston, West Virginia. It's not glamorous work, but it pays better than most jobs around here, and it keeps me on my own schedule. That's the way I like it. I've never been one for crowds or noise. When I left the city, I promised myself I'd find somewhere quiet, somewhere that actually felt like silence. And that's exactly what I got. About 3 years ago, I found this cheap little A-frame cabin 20 minutes down a dirt road that barely counts as a road. No neighbors, no lights for miles, just a wall of black woods wrapping around the place like it's swallowing it whole. The locals had all kinds of stories about the area. I didn't care much. I'd spent a decade with sirens outside my apartment window every night. I was done with that. Out here you could hear your own heartbeat if you stood still long enough. And for a while, that peace was everything I wanted. Until one evening when I noticed the porch light. I was rinsing out my dinner plate when I saw it flicker in the reflection of the window. At first I thought nothing of it. But it wasn't the normal kind of flicker. This one was steady. On, off, on again. I frowned, dried my hands, and went to the wall switch. When I flipped it off, the light stayed on. That made my stomach twist. I'd literally replaced that bulb yesterday. Brand new. So either it was a bad bulb or something was off with the wiring. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out into the cool night air, and opened the little utility box by the porch. The forest was already loud with crickets and the hum of something unseen. When I cut the breaker, the light went out. But right as I turned to go back inside, I saw something move, low to the ground just beyond the brush line. It wasn't an animal sound. It was the motion that got me. Too fast to be a person crawling, too smooth to be a deer. Just a dark shape gliding from one side of the yard to the other before vanishing into the trees. I stood there for a while with my flashlight sweeping the edge of the woods, waiting for something to move again. But the only thing moving was my breath in the cold. I went inside, locked the door, told myself it was a raccoon, maybe a coyote. You hear all kinds of things out here if you stay up late enough. I didn't sleep much that night. 2 nights later, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound that still crawls under my skin when I think about it. Tap. Pause. Tap. Pause. Not loud, just steady, like something deliberate. At first, I thought it was the pipes or maybe the heater expanding, but it kept the same rhythm over and over. When I really listened, I realized it was coming from the window next to my bed, metal on glass. I got up slowly, keeping my breathing quiet, and walked over. Just as I reached for the curtain, it stopped. Everything went dead silent. I yanked the curtain back. Nothing. Just my own face reflected in the dark. I turned on the porch floodlight, stepped outside barefoot, and froze. In the middle of my yard, in the exact center, someone had stacked 3 smooth stones on top of each other. Perfect balance. Too perfect, I knew every inch of that yard. Those rocks weren't there earlier. Something about the way they stood made my chest go cold. I walked over, kicked them over, and scanned the tree line again. Nothing. No movement. No snapping twigs. No breath. But I didn't go back to bed that night. A few days went by quietly, and I tried to convince myself it was just some local kids messing around. Until about a week later, I pulled into my driveway around 3 a.m. after a long shift. I was sitting in the truck, watching the windshield fog up from my breath, when I caught movement between the trees in the headlights. At first, I thought it was a shadow, but when I leaned forward, I realized it was a man. He was standing between 2 trees about 30 feet back. Tall, lanky, not moving. He was facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I could make out something hanging from his shoulder, maybe a duffel bag or a backpack. But what froze me wasn't what he was carrying. It was how still he was. He didn't move an inch. I turned off the headlights. He stayed there, opened my door, slammed it shut, nothing, no reaction. I called out, "Hey, you lost?" He didn't answer. Just took one slow step back, like he was being pulled into the trees until he vanished into the dark. I stood there for a long time, staring into that empty space. Then I went inside, locked every door, turned off every light except one, and sat on the couch with my shotgun in my lap until sunrise. When daylight came, I walked the property looking for footprints, but the ground was covered in dry leaves. Nothing. That afternoon, I drove into town and bought 3 motion-activated trail cameras. I set 2 on the porch and 1 aimed at the woods where I'd seen him. That night, the cameras went off constantly, but when I checked the footage, there was nothing. No animals, no wind. Just empty frames triggered over and over again. Then one night while I was at work, my phone buzzed. One of the cameras had picked up an audio clip. I played it in the break room. It was a whisper, a voice, barely audible but clear enough to understand. It said, "Inside." That word hit harder than I expected. I froze, staring at the screen until my hands started shaking. Then I called my buddy Sean and crashed at his place for a few nights. When I came back, everything looked untouched. Doors locked, windows sealed. But there was this heaviness inside the cabin, like the air had changed while I was gone. A few days later, I came home just before dark and noticed something smeared across my front door glass. Looked like dirt at first until I got close. They were handprints, small ones. 4 fingers, no thumb. The prints streaked downward, like something had been dragging them across the glass. Inside, in front of the back door, someone had arranged twigs into a strange pattern, 2 circles, one above the other, with a single stick running through both. I burned them outside in a metal bucket. That night, I stayed awake with every light off, shotgun ready. Phone open to the camera app. Around 1:30 a.m., I got an alert. The porch camera showed a woman standing at the door. Her head was tilted all the way back, hair hanging straight down over her shoulders. She didn't knock, didn't move. Then, without warning, her head snapped forward like something had yanked it by the scalp. Her face was smeared with something black and shiny, oil or blood, I don't know. Her eyes were wide open. She stared straight into the camera. Her mouth started moving, but no sound came through. Then she turned around and walked away backward. Not turning around and walking, but literally moving in reverse until she vanished into the dark. I shut off the feed, pressed my back against the wall, and sat there until sunrise. When I finally stepped outside, I found a line of bare footprints leading from the porch into the woods. The rain had fallen overnight, but the prints were perfect, edges crisp, deep enough to still be fresh. I spent that whole day boarding up the windows, screwed plywood over every frame, left just enough cracks for light to leak through. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. At exactly 4:08 a.m., every camera went dead. Not offline, dead, one by one. Then came the knock, not on the front door, not even on the windows, on the wall behind the couch. I didn't turn around, didn't even breathe for a full 10 seconds. Then, I stood up, grabbed my keys, unlocked the front door, and walked out into the cold. Didn't run, didn't look back. Just walked down the long dirt road until I hit the main highway. I slept in my truck at a gas station off Route 60 for 2 nights. When I finally worked up the nerve to drive back, the cabin looked exactly the same. No prints, no sign of anything. I took down the cameras, sold them at a pawn shop, and started keeping my gun closer than I ever used to. It's been quiet since. But I'll be honest. When I close my eyes at night, sometimes I still hear that soft tapping on glass, slow and deliberate, and I still can't sleep unless I know the shotgun's loaded and within reach. I'm 28, and for most of the past few years my life has existed in pixels and static. I work remote IT support for a small mining logistics company, one of those outfits that keeps rigs and dispatch systems alive through the night in the Appalachian backcountry. You wouldn't know the name unless you've spent nights in a cab somewhere in West Virginia listening to backup alarms and the diesel hum of a half-broken loader. It wasn't bad work. It paid well enough, but it bled me dry in a way I didn't notice until I stopped. 3 straight years of midnight server patches, frozen screens, and guys shouting over the radio turned my brain into static. I was done, burned through. So when I got the chance to take a full month off in early spring of 2022, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even think. I just clicked approve on the vacation form and shut my laptop like it might bite me if I opened it again. That's when Uncle Henry called. He said, "Heard you're taking some time off, boy. You want peace and quiet? I got something better than a hotel." Turns out he still owned his old hunting cabin up in Nicholas County. Said I could have it as long as I wanted, free. Just needed to bring my own propane and make sure the chimney flue was clear before lighting a fire. It was deep enough into the hills that the nearest gas station was a 40-minute drive downhill. No neighbors, no service towers, no noise. When he told me it hadn't been used since 2018, I asked why. He just laughed lightly and said a storm knocked down a tree across the old access road once, trapped him there half a day. Didn't feel right after that, he muttered. That place changed. He paused a bit before adding, "Make sure you lean into the door when you lock it. It sticks sometimes." At the time, I just laughed. Thought he was being dramatic. The first glimpse I got of that place, I understood what he meant. I had to park half a mile from the cabin because the access trail had eroded into a ditch too deep to drive over. The rest I hiked, dragging my cheap rolling cooler through mud and dead leaves. The trail turned into 2 fading ruts in the dirt, lined with moss, more fit for deer than trucks. The cabin sat halfway up a slope, tucked so deep into the trees that you could walk right past it if you weren't looking. The forest felt close, too close. The air pressed in thick, and even though it was barely noon, the light was dim. The cabin itself was small and crooked, the kind of structure that looked tired of standing. No sign, no fence, no mailbox. Just weathered boards, a sagging porch, and the quiet that settles heavy in your chest. Before I even stepped onto the property, I felt it, like a low static hum in my knees. Not fear exactly, just a wrongness that the rational part of your brain can't quite name. Inside, the air was stale. Old mouse droppings, damp wood, and dust layered over everything. One narrow bed, a little table, a stove in the corner. The wallpaper had peeled away in long curls like old bark. There was a trunk in the corner full of VHS tapes. No labels, no cases, just stacks of black cassettes with worn edges. I never bothered to play them. I swept out the cobwebs, unpacked my gear, and set up my laptop with the little satellite modem I'd brought. It worked, barely. News headlines loaded. Email too, slow as syrup. I figured that was all I'd need. The first week passed like a dream. I slept, read, and walked the ridge trails until my legs burned. Ate cold beans and protein bars. The quiet was strange at first, too heavy, but after a few days I got used to it. I didn't hear a thing at night, not even wind. That changed on the 8th day. It was the kind of awakening that doesn't creep up on you. You just wake. My eyes snapped open. My chest was already tight. I didn't know why. The cabin was dead quiet except for the soft hiss of the propane heater. Then came the sound. A single, solid thud from the porch. Not a creak, not a scuffle. A thud heavy and deliberate, like someone dropped a thick book flat on the floorboards. It wasn't random. I could feel it. I stayed perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering so hard I could feel it behind my teeth. No footsteps followed. No movement, just silence. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a branch fell. Maybe ice slid from the roof. Maybe anything else. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next night, it happened again. Same hour, around 3:10 a.m., same sound. A single, deliberate thud on the porch. I sat up in bed this time, hands gripping the blanket, waiting for the next sound. None came. By the third night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I sat on the couch, lights off, the shotgun Uncle Henry kept for critters resting across my lap. 12 a.m., thud, then another. 2 steps, slow, testing. The boards flexed under the weight. Groaning just slightly, I stood and moved to the window, cracked the curtain an inch. The porch was empty, no wind, no movement, but my chest felt full, like static was pressing against my ribs, like I was looking at something that was looking back. I started locking the bedroom door after that. It made no difference, but it helped me pretend I had control. On the 12th morning, after a night of rain, I stepped outside and froze. There were footprints in the mud, bare ones, human-shaped, but not human. The toes were too long, the arches missing, the spacing wrong. Some led up the porch steps, others down, none of them mine. They looked clean, intentional. I snapped pictures and drove all the way into Summersville to hit a library Wi-Fi connection. I emailed them to my buddy Ben, who works trail maintenance for the state park. He knows every track in these hills. He wrote back, "Looks fake, like someone dragged their feet or used molds," but I'd seen them. They weren't fake, they were real. After that, the nights changed. The thuds came in patterns, sometimes once, sometimes 3 or 4 times, always between 3 and 3:20 a.m. Each sound carried intent, like it was calling attention to itself. On the 15th day, I found an old trail camera in a plastic bin behind the shed. Batteries still worked. I set it above the porch, aimed toward the steps. That night I didn't sleep. Just watched the window. 10 a.m. Thud. The next morning I checked the camera. There was one clip, 17 seconds. The porch looked empty. Then something slid past the far left corner of the frame. It was tall. Too tall. It didn't walk. It glided. Smooth and silent. Then the camera blinked once, and the recording cut out. Battery still full, no error, no reason, just black. That night I set a heavy LED floodlight on the porch, aimed at the woods. I wanted to see it. I don't know why, maybe I just needed proof. At 3:12 the thud came again, only this time, it came from the side of the cabin, right near the bedroom wall. Then another, higher up, then a dragging sound, slow and wet. Sliding down the wood siding like a hand or something trying to be a hand. I didn't move until sunrise. When I stepped outside, my stomach turned. Below the bedroom window were 2 long, dark smears and oily and slick dragged downward. Each one ended in a kind of point, like fingers that had melted into claws. That's when I called my uncle. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice sounded tired, old. "Henry," I said, "something's been outside the cabin. Every night. I've got prints, hand marks, everything. Silence. 10 seconds, maybe more." Then he said quietly, "I stopped going there after I saw it." I felt my throat tighten. "Saw what?" He sighed, deep and shaky. "I was skinning a deer on the porch one morning. Thought I was being watched. Looked up, saw something standing in the trees. Thought it was a man at first, but it was too tall. Shoulders. All wrong. Didn't move right. What did it look like?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Keep the lights off. Don't let it know you see it." That was it. I packed everything in less than an hour. By 4 in the afternoon, I was halfway down the mountain, my cooler rattling in the back seat. I didn't stop. I didn't look in the rear view more than once, just kept driving. 3 weeks later, I got a text from my uncle. "Cabin sold. Cash buyer. Guy from New Mexico." That was all it said. We haven't spoken about it since. I never thought quiet could feel dangerous. When I left the city last October, I just needed rest. Sleep, silence, space. I'd been working remote IT support for years, buried under endless pings and late-night server crashes, and my brain felt like it was rotting from the inside. Every sound in my apartment was too much. It all clawed at my nerves until I couldn't tell exhaustion from madness. So, I found a listing online. A small cabin tucked somewhere in the Blue Ridge foothills near a town called Mill Hollow, North Carolina. Barely a dot on the map. No neighbors for half a mile, no Wi-Fi. Just a wood stove, a clawfoot tub, and a porch that sagged like a tired old man. Perfect. When I first arrived, I remember thinking the air smelled different, wet, earthy, alive. The road that led there was more of a suggestion than an actual path. Gravel fading into dirt, dirt fading into leaves. I parked halfway up the hill and carried my stuff the rest of the way. My dog Murphy trotted ahead, nose down, tail up like he already owned the place. For the first few days, it was exactly what I needed. I'd wake up late, make coffee, sit on the porch and just listen. The wind through the trees, birds you never hear in the city, the occasional creak of the cabin settling. At night, I'd read by lantern light until my eyes felt heavy. For the first time in years, I slept straight through the night. But peace doesn't last. It never does. It started with the knocking. It was a Tuesday night, late, close to midnight. I'd just washed the dishes and was reaching for the light switch when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. On the front door. Not loud. Just deliberate, rhythmic. 1, 2, 3. I froze mid-step. Murphy was asleep in the living room, snoring softly. There hadn't been a sound before it. No footsteps, no crunch of gravel, nothing. I remember the air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. I crept to the door, leaned forward, and peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just black. I didn't call out, didn't move. My pulse was in my throat. Whoever or whatever was out there wasn't making a sound. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes before finally backing away and locking the deadbolt twice. Then I walked the whole cabin, checking every window, every latch. Everything was sealed tight. When I woke up the next morning, it almost felt like a dream. Almost. I walked down the drive, checked around my truck, scanned the soft mud for footprints. Nothing. Just wet leaves and silence. Still, I knew. Branches don't knock. 2 nights later it came again, only this time from the sour Miramon back wall. That side of the cabin faced nothing but dense forest. No porch, no light, no trail, just an ocean of black trees. The knocks were identical. 3, spaced evenly apart. Murphy's ears perked up. He didn't bark, but his body went rigid. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped to the back door. When I cracked it open, the forest swallowed me whole. My beam caught nothing but trunks and fog. No movement, no noise. Just the sense that something had been standing close, too close, and slipped away the moment I opened the door. That night, I didn't sleep much. By Friday, the strangeness deepened. I was brushing my teeth when the lights dimmed, not flickered. Dimmed, like someone was slowly turning down a dial. I stared at the bulb over the sink as it shifted from white to yellow, then steadied again. When I stepped into the hallway, my stomach dropped. The front door, which I always locked first thing after dinner, was unlatched. The bolt undone. The handle turned just enough to hang loose. I stood there staring at it, toothbrush still in my hand, foam dripping from my lip. I relocked it, jammed a stool under the knob, and dragged a chair into the hallway. Murphy lay across my feet, alert, his chest rumbling with a low growl every time the cabin creaked. We stayed up the entire night like that, listening, waiting. The next morning, I drove into town and bought extra locks, a sliding bolt for the top, and a broom handle to wedge under the knob. It looked ridiculous, but it made me feel better. That night was silent, too silent. Around 2:30 a.m. something woke me, a sharp, bone-deep awareness like my body knew before my mind did. I turned on my side, blinked toward the window above my bed, and saw a figure at the tree line, still, upright, facing the cabin. I couldn't see their face, just the outline of a person, tall, head tilted slightly forward like they were staring straight through the glass. My heart stopped. I fumbled for my flashlight, flicked it on, and aimed it out the window. Nothing. Just trees. Murphy sat beside me, watching that same patch of darkness long after the beam died. He didn't bark, just stared. I didn't sleep again until morning. The days that followed were quiet, but the feeling remained, like I was being watched through the cracks in the curtains. By Saturday, I parked the truck facing downhill, engine ready, keys by the door. I told myself I'd leave the next day if it didn't feel right. But I didn't make it that long. It happened again. Near midnight, I was lying in bed, earbuds in, listening to some podcast about unsolved disappearances. Ironic. Looking back, when a thud arm shook the side of the cabin, solid, heavy, I yanked the earbuds out. Murphy sprang up, growling low, another thud, this time from the back wall. I got up slowly, every nerve screaming. Each step felt like walking into a trap. Another hit. Closer now. Right beneath the kitchen window. I pulled the curtain back just as something blurred past. The glass, low to the ground fast, too big for a raccoon, too fluid for a person crawling. My body acted before my brain did. I grabbed the flashlight, flipped on the porch light, and threw open the front door. The steps were empty. The woods were still. Not even crickets then. "Hey." The voice came from the back of the cabin. Calm, close, not loud. Like someone standing just outside, trying to sound friendly. My blood went cold. I didn't answer. I turned on every light in the place, grabbed my keys, and opened the front door again. That's when I saw it. Something sitting on the step. A piece of wood about 6 inches long, splintered at the edge. 2 rusted nails jutting from the side. I recognized it immediately. It was from my back deck. Something had torn it off. I stepped backward into the cabin, locked the door, and called the sheriff. They said they'd send someone in the morning. Murphy and I sat on the floor all night, backs to the door, flashlight aimed at the window. He didn't sleep, just growled, quiet and constant. Every so often I swore I heard something faint out in the trees, dragging, breathing. When the first light touched the hills, a deputy finally pulled up. Young guy, polite, clearly trying not to spook me. I showed him the board and led him around back. He crouched near the tree line, pointed to the dirt. There, barely visible, were 2 long drag marks out parallel, leading from the edge of the deck into the forest. Could be an animal, he said. But his voice didn't sound convinced. He told me to keep things locked up and maybe set up cameras if I planned to stay. I didn't. I packed every single thing I owned in under 15 minutes, shoved it into the truck, and peeled down that gravel road without even glancing back. I never told anyone the full story, just that the place didn't feel right.